Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Circle Up and Get Real, where we talk about things that matter with people who matter. And I am so excited to have this conversation today with Carla Christofferson, who is, Carla, could I say a former North Dakotan, or are you once a North Dakotan, always a North Dakotan?
Um, Once a North Dakotan, always a North Dakotan. In fact, I've sort of come full circle and first bought campers in a campground. And a couple of years ago, I bought a house on the lake, on Devil's Lake.
In North Dakota. I love it.
Yep.
Okay, so Carla is originally from Tolna. She grew up on a sheep farm and went to UND, which is not that far away, really, from where you grew up. How far? A couple hours?
Um, it's 90 miles. I
Yeah.
actually started at Williston
Okay.
and then
So
I went to UND.
did you play basketball
Yeah,
at Williston and
yes.
UND?
No.
Okay. So this is going to figure into the story, everybody. Hang in with me here. Carla was also Miss North Dakota, which I did not know. And you said in the bio you sent me to make money to get through college, which is
Correct.
a great reason.
I was lazy and I didn't want to have to hold a job.
That's a lot of work, though, to be Miss North Dakota. So you
Uh,
did that. Then you went on to Yale Law School, like no slough there. That's a pretty big deal. She's been in LA right out of college.
Law
Did you
school.
go right to LA? Okay. Managing partner of an LA office. Okay, we're going to get to the co-owner of the LA SPARKS because that's where a lot of this conversation I want to learn about. But before that, Carla, tell me about growing up in a small town in North Dakota and getting to where you've become. Because do you have that in your mind from the time you're a little kid that you want to go to LA and be famous?
Uh, no. No, I was one of the few kids in my class of 13 who would come home in the summers, during college, and I would coach softball and I helped raise my niece. And I think everyone thought more that I would be staying there. But my senior year of college, when my best friend from the time I was three and I had to put together our money so we could get a soda, and I was going to be a journalist. And I'm like, oh man, am I tired of being poor?
Mm.
I'm like, I can't be a journalist. Like, and so I'm like, I'll apply to law school. I'd never known a lawyer, never knew
Wow.
anyone. So, I took the test that you take to, your test is called the LSAT. And I think left because it was getting to the end of the school year. Like, I think I had $500 left in my bank account, and each application was $50. So I mailed for, because you have to mail for things then. I mailed away for like every school in the United States. And
Wow.
then I divided them up into like schools that I was pretty sure I would get into,
Mhm.
and then sort of stretch and then stretch.
Mm.
And I had, after my first year of college, I was living with my sister in her trailer, and she was like, "Hey, you want to move to California?" She had seen oil rigs were dying at the time,
Mhm.
and so she shipped her husband out to California to work on the oil rigs. And so then at the end of my first year, we loaded up a borrowed horse trailer. I'm not joking. We were the Beverly Hillbillies, and we drove to California. And as I was staying there over the summer, I worked at a McDonald's, and I was like, what am I going to do? Like, and she goes, well, you can just go to the community college here. I'm like, and then like, so when Sarah Palin came up about, oh yeah, she had to go to these different schools, I'm like, oh, I'm so glad I didn't do that. I said, I'm going back to Williston.
Mm.
So I drove back to Williston and finished up there and went. But like my sister was always like, you got to come back out. You got to come back out to California.
Mm.
And she was, and the first law school I got accepted into was UCLA.
Wow.
And, but, but then I was at the Miss USA pageant, and my best friend, Laura, um, got the letter from Yale. And so she steamed it open, saw I was accepted. So she put it back together and she mailed it to me at the pageant, because we were there a month.
Wow.
And so when the pageant people found out, and it was the first year Donald Trump owned it.
Yeah.
So there was a whole, I was able to work a deal with a UND professor in public relations that I could miss class as long as I did a project while I was there on how they were like revamping the public relations stuff. So like so I was basically working while I was there.
Wow.
But so I got this letter and found out, and the pageant people went bonkers, because they were like, they started this thing like, they're not just pretty, they're smart too. And I'm like, well, I am. I'm not sure about the rest of them. But when you have to go through and make your introduction, and my kids think my introduction is hilarious, because it's like, I'll do an invitation for you if you would like, but yes. They said, okay, but they said, well, you have to say you're attending Yale Law School in the fall. And I'm like, well, I haven't decided yet, because I still have stuff coming in from schools. And they're like, no, you have to say that.
Wow.
I'm like, okay. So yeah, it's like, hi, I'm Carla Christofferson from Tolna, North Dakota. I'll be attending Yale Law School in the fall. And
oh, I love it.
Yeah. And when I got off the stage, I'm like, well, I guess I'm going to Yale, because I can't be a liar on national television.
Wow.
That's how I chose how to go to Yale.
Okay. All right. There's integrity to that, though. I don't want to be a liar on national television.
No, but don't get me wrong. There could not have been a better school for me, because it's only have 170 kids in a class. So, and I borrowed my mom's pickup truck.
Wow.
I piled all of my stuff in the back, including a lot of stuffed animals, which made the East Coast sophisticated kids look at me like with their head tilted. And of course, at least at the time, we were about 10 years behind music and everything. So I walked around campus like the poor version of Legally Blonde, because I was like, I had permed hair, and my mom had made me a sweatshirt that had a little wooden heart where a handkerchief went through it.
Oh, hilarious.
And I'm like, hi. And swear to God, people were just staring at me like, and finally, like, it's a little like, I'm like, oh my God, this is a disaster. And finally I walked up, there was a table. The Christian fellows were putting on an ice cream social. And I walked up and I'm like, hi. And they're like, hi.
We found one.
Well, and like, I can't say I was very religious at that point, but I'm a big in for a penny, in for a pound person. Yeah. So I didn't just join. I became the head of Christian Fellowship.
Wow. Wow.
I mean, I look back and I'm like, oh my God.
So funny.
But my sister was mad that I didn't go to UCLA. So I pretty much interviewed with firms, mostly, in LA. But it came down to, I thought it was the best place to be a woman lawyer, but it was really close between that and Minneapolis. Because Minneapolis is also the women were all working, and, it was sort of a similar vibe to LA. It was really interesting.
What year was this? Where were we in the?
I graduated in 1992.
So the early 90s, things were different than they are today for women, I would hope.
Well, yeah, they were still, it wasn't great, but LA had so many women lawyers who had gone in-house, and so now they sort of controlled business. And so it was just a progressive. And when I interviewed at the law firm I went to, O'Malveny, even if I was interviewing with men, I would ask them about like what their significant other does. And all of them had significant others who were doing significant things. And so I thought that would be a good place.
Right.
But like everything for me, maybe this is why it's always in North Dakota, and it all came back, like, because after going to law school, a lot of people clerk for like a federal judge. So I was going to clerk for a year and then go to my law firm where I already had an offer. So I'm interviewing, and I go interview with the chief judge of Los Angeles, or the Central District. And we're talking, and he goes, you're from North Dakota. He goes, do you know where Michigan, North Dakota is? I'm like, and this is always my reaction. It drives my friends, like, they just look at me because I'm like, oh my God, yeah, it's like 15 miles from my farm. Oh my God. And he goes, well, my mom, is a lamb from Michigan. We still own the farm. I'm like, oh my God, I played basketball with Jennifer Lamb, and my brother played basketball with Joe Lamb.
If you aren't watching this, if you're listening to this podcast on the audio, you're missing out because you need to see the video. This is so North Dakota, Carla. This is what it's like. And that's my cousin and my third aunt.
Oh yeah, no, my daughter, who's 12, actually asked me the other day, well, since you're related to everyone in North Dakota, does that mean your first kiss was with a cousin?
That's probably not that far from the truth.
And I said, and I'm like, no, it was, this person. And I said the name, and she said, well, then why did you kiss him? I was sitting next to him on the bus.
That's so funny. Oh my gosh. This is so
Yeah.
awesome.
So my kid, but it's nice because both of my kids in chapel this year talked about me and North Dakota and their experiences. That's what Jack wrote his final English paper on, was the lessons he's learned in North Dakota. It's so I've made them go back there every summer since my daughter was 3 and my son was 5.
Wow.
So I guess
did it stay with your parents?
No, I bought I bought a camper and then another camper. Somehow talked some family into coming with me from out here, and they've been going back with me for 10 years too. And we were in the campground, Stone Ridge, right on Devil's Lake. And so that's where we were until a couple years ago when I bought a house on Devil's Lake.
So you're a multi-state owner. You are a North Dakotan and a Californian.
Yeah, so I get to pay taxes in both states.
Right.
I also own my farm.
Okay.
That I grew up on.
Okay, awesome. So let's get into this because you have done a lot of things in your career. Let's start with law. You've been general counsel of a $20 billion company, chief risk officer of a $20 billion technology company, and now back to big law. So do you want to talk a little bit about that, just the law part of your, we're going to get into the basketball part.
Yeah, no, I was incredibly fortunate with the law firm that I chose. And, the boys there all wanted all the entertainment stuff. So I said, I raised my hand for everything else. So the first 2 cases I got were for ExxonMobil and Trader Joe's, the Valdez case. They gave me 1 day notice to move to Alaska for what turned out to be 8 months. But I was still working for them 23 years later when I went in-house to AECOM. And AECOM, is an engineering construction. They did Freedom Towers when those got rebuilt. They did the SoFi Stadium. They do massive projects. And they kept giving, it was really super fun. And I got to travel the world, and they gave me a bunch of more, responsibilities. It turned out that pretty much anyone they liked that was sort of threatening to leave the firm or the company, they would just decide that that's because they didn't like their boss. They would decide it was a risk function, and suddenly they reported to me.
Oh, okay.
So by the time I left, I had, everything: safety, quality, security, just anything you could name as under that title. And so that was really interesting because it was businessy, and so it was great experience. And then, there were a lot of activist investors that were trying to make changes, and I could sort of see they were going to make the company move to Dallas. So the head of HR had moved to DXC Technologies, and I thought, oh, well, that might be good to get some experience in technology because I had none. That was the one area I had. And so that, so that was a good experience too. But, my grounding really came at O'Melveny since I was there 23 years. And, I was so privileged to have mentors who really invested in me, including, our own North Dakotan, Warren Christopher, who was there. And he was really the one. He would sit me down and he'd be like, well, what are you going to do to make this, community and a better place? Because that's our responsibility. That's what Jack O'Melveny did. And that's, and it's like, so, and that's how he got me onto the Library Foundation, which sort of led to my getting onto boards of other nonprofits. And, growing up in North Dakota poor, you're sort of more on the receiving end. And so the chance to be able to give back and try to help, because there's some really significant problems, as you probably know, in Los Angeles with the inequality.
Right.
So, I find that very meaningful to sort of round out things. But I was one of those strange lawyers where I always liked what I was doing, right? I flew to Fargo to go to the Fargo Dome because the Eagles manager said he was not going to be in Fargo without me there.
The band?
The band.
The Eagles? What?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So that had been the first time I really went back to North Dakota, because I think once I left, I just couldn't believe I got out. And so I didn't go back for a long time until that was my first time. Wow. And I had a little bit of a panic attack thinking I was never going to get out again. But then UND drew me into their capital campaign, and so I got reconnected, and then it just started feeling like home again, right? I call it home. When I say I say, oh, I'm going home.
I get that. And I think a lot of people probably understand the getting out and coming back, especially in small states like ours or small populations. People want to get out and see the rest of the world. And if they don't, sometimes I'm speaking as one who has not left. I've only lived in this state, but I've traveled a lot. And I know a lot of people. There's such benefits to everything as long as we expand our awareness, I think. So the fact that you said I was afraid I wouldn't get out and get back, I mean, that probably is true for anybody, any young person or younger person in their career. Yet now I love how you have two homes now, there and here. So there are always good things. Maybe we don't recognize the good things when we have them. Maybe we have to look back on them to recognize the benefits that we had. But I'm just glad that you are still connected with us here.
Yeah, and I'm surprised. I mean, as I said, like there were 4 times this year, like when they had to sort of express stuff, and it all tied to like me and or North Dakota. It was nice.
Wow, that's great. So inside all of this, your career, you're doing all this great stuff. There comes a point at which you become an owner of a WNBA team. And I'm fascinated by that, especially now because I'm going to admit that I'm a newly engaged WNBA follower now. And I played basketball in college. I mean, I'm a basketball fan forever, but this is fascinating to me because I'd like to talk about some of that later. But tell me how you got there. How did that happen for you? Ellie Sparks. Ellie Sparks.
Yeah. No. Yeah. So, me and my friend Kathy, I met her because she was my client. I was representing her company on something, and she mentioned, "Oh, do you want to go to Sparks game with me?" I'm like, "Oh, I have Sparks tickets." And at that time, there were not very many of them.
Right.
And so we would go to the games, and my person, who I was dating would often flake, and Kathy's friends would often flake, and we're like, "Why don't we just put our seats together?" So we put our seats together, and then one game I happened to bring Eddie Van Halen.
Oh, just wait a second. You don't just say that. Just happened to bring Eddie Van Halen. Okay.
Yeah.
One of the perks of living in LA.
Well, yeah. Well, I met him because I was trying to win a bet with my friend. We always bet dinner on random stuff. And I had moved out into a rental house 3 days where birthdays are 1 day apart. And it was on Memorial Day weekend that weekend. And Wednesday, I'm like, I'm going to throw a party because I was getting a divorce. I'm throwing a divorce party. And she's like, I'm like, I bet I can get 50 people here. She goes, Wednesday before Memorial Day, you think you're going to get 50 people? I'm like, yes, I'll bake you dinner. So I start dialing for dollars, and I was like, I get it. So I called up Eddie, who I'd been representing, and we had been sort of talking on the phone. I'm like, you want to come? And he's like, I said, you want to come to my freedom party? And he goes, yeah.
Oh, funny. Oh my
And
God.
so he showed up at my party. You can imagine like all the young associates who are like, who is Carla? Like what is going on here? It was really funny. And so, we started dating. We dated for like 6 months, but so he came to the Sparks game with me. And, we were talking, and we were mad at the coach, who was Bibby, because like he called the players girls. He didn't even know who Lisa Leslie was. And we were like, oh my God. Like, I'm like, we need it. I said, and I turned to Kathy, I'm like, if we own this team, we would get, and Eddie was like, well, who'd you want, Kathy to coach? And I'm like, no, we'd bring back Michael Cooper. He goes, oh, I played high school basketball with Michael Cooper.
No way.
Yes. Swear to God. He goes, I think I still have his number. And I'm like, okay, now my world is getting weird.
Yeah.
And so we went into the chairman's room, and he's chatting away with Johnny Buss, and they go into the smoking area. Johnny Buss was the bus one that ran the Sparks. And Ed came out, and it was like, oh my God, Johnny and I were talking about what we could do and with this. And like, he had never been to a game. Like, and I just turned to Kathy, and I'm like, we need to buy this team. And so we'd sit courtside, and I'd keep saying that. I kept saying, like, we just need to buy this team. And she would laugh at me. And finally it was like, why, instead of saying, why us, we started saying, why not us? And so she had been a banking lawyer, and she had helped, and she had helped out like a young banker who had risen to become the president of Broadway Federal, which is the largest African-owned bank on the West Coast. And he had 3 daughters. So we got a meeting with him, and we sort of pitched that, first it wasn't for sale. So we had to get a meeting with the Lakers, but we knew like they didn't like some stuff, like they had to bus kids in, and they had to do this stuff. And so our pitch was, listen, we know this is just a thorn because nothing was profitable in your side in the summer, and, let's pretend you're Universal Studios, I don't know who does Mission Impossible, but it's like, it makes a lot more sense to spend your time and money on Mission Impossible than on like an indie film. We would treat the Sparks like an indie film, and it would be just our focus. And, and Kathy had been running a film company, so she could relate it to an actual film that if you put your time on it, you can. And so we left the meeting, and I remember where I was, and Kathy called, and it's like, so first we went to the banker so that we had money. We had our supportive banker. And she called, and she said, they said yes. And I'm like, oh.
Did you really think when you were doing this, did you think we're going to do this? Or did you think, wouldn't it be nice if? Oh, no,
Kathy, because this is her personality. She's like, I just thought this would be, we'd be talking about it 10 years later saying, remember that summer when we tried to buy the Sparks? Wasn't that funny? But then we had to raise the rest of the money. And ironically, since it's a women's basketball team, and it was the hardest thing I've ever done. And there's where the power of 2 comes in, because there were days where I'm like, I cannot ask one more person for money. And then I'd buck up, and then there were days she was like, I just can't do this today. And it was it really does show me the power of having a support system. And took us 9 months to raise money, which we thought was pretty interesting given what, that we were buying a
Yeah,
women's
9
team.
months,
It was,
right on.
yeah. Yeah. And so then the day before the announcement was made at the Staples Center, we get a call from Lisa Leslie saying she's pregnant.
Oh no. And she's your star. I mean, she's the one everybody knows.
Correct.
Right. Oh no.
But I did tell my friend, Kathy, that I would not buy the team unless I could have a mascot. And she said, no, LA's too cool. Like, and I said, no, 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 no. And so I actually created Sparky, the mascot.
Sparky,
And
you did.
I picked the fur, I designed it, and he was beloved by the fans.
Awesome.
So we just took the attitude that it's, there are 17 home games. It's like, okay, we're throwing 17 kick-ass parties over the summer. And that was our approach.
Nice.
And but it would I didn't know if we'd succeed.
So Lisa couldn't play though, right? So you missed her on that first year.
Oh, no kidding. Yeah. Oh no, yeah. And we missed the playoffs for the first time because we didn't have Lisa Leslie. But that put us into the lottery, and we ended up with the number 1 pick, which was Candace Parker.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Right. Her first game she dunked. She was Rookie of the Year and MVP that year. Unfortunately, it was an Olympic year. And we were all the way in the playoffs playing San Antonio. And, it was towards the end, and, Candace right out of college, she was pulling her shirt to come out.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what the hell's going on? She's like 22. Why does she need to come out?
Yeah.
And then our manager had told her, like, in the halftime, she had been in the bathroom throwing up, or in the locker room. Yeah, I guess there was a little bit too much celebration at the Olympics because she was pregnant.
No.
And yeah. And so we were ahead by 2, and they had the ball like from where like Caitlin Clark shoots on the floor. And they got it in, and the person heaved it up, and it went in, and we lost. Like, we would have won the championship.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know, since you're late, like, I don't think it was that year because it was when I was pregnant. Well, where Detroit and LA got into a brawl in the last, I think there was only it was Candace's first year because they were always known, it's Bill Lambier, like the rough and tumble. And so as a rookie, sort of like what's happening now with Caitlin, like towards the very end, like they were just trying to roughhouse her, and she got knocked to the floor. And then one of the players came and just stepped over top of her and went down, and like mayhem ensued. Mayhem. And like, we were in floor seats, but the second row, I actually stood up on my chair, and I'm like, and people were taking swings. Like, Leslie did a whole roundout house. Wow. There were so many suspensions and fines, and they just called the game right then and there.
Wow.
And they didn't have the women's shower. They just put them on the bus.
Wow.
And it was like, it's anyone can like Google it and find it. It was wild.
Wow. Then tell me in the timeline, was this your first year owning?
That was second because that's when we got Candace.
Yeah. Wow. So welcome to the WNBA.
Yeah.
Owner. So what year was this when you first, because didn't you have
2009? 2009, because we bought it December 2007. So 2008 was our first year, and then 2009.
Okay. So then tell me about that experience and those teams and how the WNBA was then. You said they weren't making money. They were like the
stepchild.
Stepchild of the Lakers. And how long did that last? And was that just what you expected it to be? Yeah,
we had our 3-year business plan, but especially then, how you get to profitability is through marketing money, because seats are less expensive. You still have your expenses, and at the time, television revenues weren't that big. So how you got there was marketing money. So buying the team right before the financial crisis of 2008, turned our 3-year plan into a 5-year plan.
Mhm.
And we ultimately had to take our biggest investor and switch places. So we became minority owners and they became majority.
Okay.
But like we were still there and we were the face of the team. You know, the fans, my children were so cooperative. They both were born on the big away stands that you have each summer. Seriously. So they never, I didn't miss a game and they didn't miss a game. Like it was sort of unbelievable. So the fans really thought the kids were their kids.
Aww.
Like, I mean, and they thought Kathy and I, well, many of them thought Kathy and I were a couple. Oh, because yeah. when they asked her what I was having, she said a boy, and they're like, "Oh, it takes 2 great women to raise a good boy." And Kathy's like, "I don't know for you, this is really good for me."
That's awesome.
But yeah, so that's my, Candace Parker's son was born, or daughter was born 4 months before my son.
Okay.
So they grew up like playing basketball after the games on the court together. And then now they go to the same high school.
Wow.
It's weird.
That's really cool though. I mean, it makes LA seem smaller.
Yeah.
Because you know people and you interact with them. So
I'll tell you my version of how the game has evolved.
Okay, thank you.
So the first go around when Michael Cooper won championships with the team, you could win championships with one player, one, and that was Lisa Leslie. Same with Houston, and Reggie Miller says the reason he was such a good basketball player is because he had the best player in the world across the room from him. But it wasn't yet sort of the team sport. Okay. Yeah. And in my opinion, Diana Taurasi changed all that. Because, I mean, it's funny because I love her, and one of my friends I played college basketball with hates her. I think she's hilarious. She's my girl crush. And so when and I think she's brilliant player. When she was having a bad game, she didn't go around and pout or do anything like that. She became the assist leader, right? Like I feel like she created the team sport. And obviously Sue Bird is brilliant at that. And, but as the game has evolved, there's just so many better players. And there's so many, even, Caitlin Clark talks about, she started working with, a sports psychologist when she was going out of high school because she felt like she needed more mental toughness. Wow. Right. And so the evolution has been slow. So but I did have the same feeling, like the whole, all about Caitlin Clark was going to, put a target on her back because there are just so many big, powerful players now that you just can't there's not one that's going to get it done. And so I was watching the Connecticut game that she's playing in, and, they have so many good players, and it was easy, like, for them to shut her down because they just have so many good players. Yeah. And, and Indiana's still not a good team, so she's not getting a lot of help. Right. So they can just double team her to their heart's delight. So I feel it's more of an evolution, but like it's an evolution in so many ways. I mean, you look at Dawn Staley. I mean, I think she was in 2 or 3 Olympics. She carried the Olympic flag. She now is, as a Black woman, Ty's the highest paid coach in the WNBA. And she lost all 5 players last year, all 5 starters last year. I know. And came back and won this year. And went undefeated. I know. It's unbelievable. But you look at everyone like, Lisa Leslie was the first to dunk. And, now she is doing some commentating. Rebecca Lobo has, got hurt right away. But, man, she's one of the best known because she's such a great broadcaster. Right. Candace Parker just got named president of women's basketball at Adidas. And so, And Becky Hammond, first woman to coach a men's NBA team. And so like I've just been watching it for so long, but like one of the things Kathy and I really tried to push the league on, and they just didn't have the right leader at the time. We were really pushing. Let's think about these women after they can't play anymore. Let's think of these women. I mean, Sue Bird can become a coach, right? Because that, but let's get them internships. I know people at Nike that I worked with, like, let's get them some internships over, when they're not in season.
Right.
Let's get them prepared for the next round because they don't make enough money to just retire.
Yeah.
Now that is changing too, right? Because you can pay, kids in college now. And and more and more of the marketing folks are realizing they had been missing out on an opportunity. And so I'm really happy to see that evolving because, it's a struggle. Like Diana Taurasi talks about how she spent more time in Russia than she did in the United States.
Yeah.
It was rough. I mean, when
Right.
Candace Parker came out, the rookie salary was $37,000.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
And the max was 100.
And I know that that's a huge issue. And I try to look at the whole picture. We weren't supporting the WNBA back then. We weren't supporting it as fans and marketing and the dollars and the eyes and all the things. So, I mean, it's kind of hard to justify that when the NBA is pulling in more revenue.
Well, and I think part of it is too, there's probably more like we would go, knock on doors, like it was like a food company, like I can't remember the name of it, but like it was a food, thing that like our fan base, it was a huge percentage of women home ownership. They were, much higher college educated than the average NBA fan. Like the demographics were just prime, but we'd go and it would be, I can't remember the food delivery, Melissa's. And we talked with like the person who was in charge of stuff like that. And he was like, yeah, I don't want those tickets. I'd rather have hockey tickets. And so he threw the money at the Kings because men were controlling that money. Because as I said, you couldn't get to profitability just by the seats.
Right.
But like, I remember talking to a partner of mine. He goes, oh yeah, like I take my daughter to NBA games. Like, I should probably take her to a SPARKS game. And I said, yeah, Bob. So you could either have your daughter want to grow up to be the best in the world at whatever she does, because that's what these players are. And that's the role models they're presenting. Or you can have your daughter want to grow up to be a Laker girl.
Yeah.
He goes, I'm a bad dad. I'm like, yes, you are.
That shifted. And again, I've not been watching the NBA very, very much. When did that start shifting where we started seeing parents like Bob bringing their daughters to the WNBA instead of the NBA? Do you?
Well, I only know from our experience when we were controlling it, and we worked really hard at doing that, and we had Tom Hanks at the game, and we had, but that's what I said, like we did every single game, right? And for camp day, which is you have to have earplugs because we bust in all of the camps for that one afternoon game. And, we realized like they were sort of complaining because the people in charge had to figure out food and So then we're like, okay, we're going to provide lunchboxes as they walk in. Here's your box. Here's your box. Here's your box. Just go to your seat. Here's your box. Here's your box. So I think, we were just a little bit ahead of our times because, 2008 repercussions lasted for a while and people didn't start spending for a while. But the television viewership had been going up every year, like, year after year. And then it, now it hit almost record, but not so much because there had been other games earlier that it sort of, especially at the beginning, it was really popular, then it waned and it went forward. There's these really interesting studies though. And I think I'm going to use a term that I hate, I really do. But I'm like, I think as sort of the generation, that was the first to become woke,
Yeah.
gets up to a point, like more of the guys are interested in coming. And there
Mhm.
was this really interesting study before that we had learned about while we owned the team, that while even if, when women were living alone or whatever, they were, watching the game, but that they ceded control
Mm.
over the remote once they were in a relationship.
Interesting.
And I think that has changed.
Yeah.
Right. And so I just feel like it's all of these little things that have led us to this moment, you know, but like some of these players who are, I mean, some of the things that are out there where, like there's one I just saw today where like Caitlin was sort of talking smack to a couple of veterans, and they just shrugged their shoulders and smiled and walked away.
Mm.
Right. It's like there are just so many good players.
Yeah.
There's like, I know there's a big controversy on the Olympic team that she didn't make it. But I mean, someone put it one way, which is there is no rookie in the NBA that would even get a sniff at being in the Olympics. Not even a sniff, because the players are so good. And
Right.
now that's what the WNBA is.
Right.
And John Wooden said, early on, if you want to teach your kids the fundamentals of basketball, don't take them to an NBA game, take them to a WNBA game.
Really? Wow.
Because they played team basketball, and that's what you do when you're growing up and playing. But one of the things I really noticed this year, and it's either from coaching changes in terms of, or just because the players are so good, but the passing has improved so much.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's a theory. I don't know if it's like, when Phil Jackson came up with the triangle and it was all innovative. Like now I feel like there's this rule, like you have to have X number of passes, because it sort of seems similar on the team. So I feel like some new theory has come about.
I also think it seems to me that people are starting to get as much joy out of making that dime than as making the basket.
Right.
Because it's so, to me, that's what I love watching right now, just how creative they're able to be when it seems to me that they're given the freedom to be creative. I'm watching, so I'll tell you, you probably don't know this. I'm the head scorekeeper for the North Dakota State men's and women's basketball teams.
Oh,
so,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so I get to be at all the games and I get to see things, but I never get to watch the game because I'm watching for the fouls and the scores, right? This has been so much fun for me because I'm able to watch a little bit more about the defenses. Defense is just fascinating to me because I don't understand if they're in a zone or if they're in a man-to-man, because they switch up and it's really cool to watch. But I'm able to see a little bit more about what I think these players who are ball handling can see. And sometimes I'm like, how do you see across court to know that you can pass that all the way across court and not get it stolen? So I'm seeing so much basketball savvy and IQ, to say nothing about athleticism. It feels like there's so much basketball IQ out there. And has that always been there? Have you always seen that? Or when you said you had one player that kind of dominated back in the day?
Well, it's that you could win with one player, right?
Yeah.
Because and you sort of had to, because the talent wasn't there yet.
Yeah.
But there are certainly, to be a good point guard, the Sue Bird.
Yeah.
I'm going to put Diana as a point guard, even though she's not. Kelsey Plum.
Yeah.
Like you have to have that basketball IQ. But I think all of them, because I think the training is different now. So they watch tapes and you learn, and so I think everyone's basketball IQ has gone way up, but it was always there for the point guards, like Sue Bird and Becky Hammond and Lindsay Whalen, in Minnesota. I mean, Gino was on a show and they were talking just about like body types, and and Gino was saying like some people like don't really have the body to make it in the WNBA. And the interviewer asked him, well, did you think Sue Bird did? And he's like, no, but you know, she's just so smart. And so it was interesting. And you know, I always, and you know, and Lindsay's now coaching at the University of Michigan or Minnesota. And that's like, that always struck me with her. Like, she looked like she should be playing hockey.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
she was built like a hockey player.
Yeah.
And since there is hockey, I was like, I wonder how she ended up doing basketball instead of hockey.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I hadn't thought about the body type. Well, speaking of body type, then you've got somebody out your way, Cameron Brink, who just gives a whole different look. I mean, in a lot of ways, right? She's feminine, she's tall, she's thin, she's in a different body type than a Lindsay Whalen, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, her body type and the way she presents herself actually reminds me a lot of Lisa Leslie.
Yeah.
Lisa was always like that. Lisa was always looked just so.
Yep.
You know, before it was even sort of allowed, she would like hem up her shorts a little bit on the side. So she always was quite aware. But you know, what we kept trying to tell people when we own the team, which is like, we're just a little behind. People forget that. I don't know how old you are, but when I grew up, NBA games were tape delayed after the news.
Yeah.
You know, and the Chicago Bulls, when there was game day, they would literally put a bull in the back of a truck and drive through the streets to try to drum up interest for people to come to the game. Like, it wasn't until the whole Showtime, you know, Magic, Larry Bird, like people forget that they too had to go through growing pains.
Yeah.
And we're like, we're just we're just a little bit behind.
Sure. Does it help? You mentioned that you had Tom Hanks in the audience. LA is a great place to see a lot of people who people know. So that's got to help a little bit in getting some of the people to know your team.
Yeah, I mean, it was funny because it was before anyone knew who Kathy and I were when we were buying the team, like the staff, you know. And they'd put out, and so we go there and they'd put out a thing, you know, to sort of say that, oh, here's all the people who come to the games. Guess who was on the top of the list? Eddie Van Halen.
Oh, of course. Had he been to one game with you then when you first brought him?
No, he came to several games.
Okay.
There are several pictures of him at games.
Okay, good. That's awesome.
Yeah, so it was so funny. I'm like, you know, he came with me, right?
Right.
Like, what?
That's funny. So comparing, I know we could talk forever. You and I could talk forever about this, but getting back to being real and what we're seeing in the WNBA now, and the controversy that's surrounding. Let's just talk about Caitlin for a second. I started watching her at Iowa, and I really appreciated the way she was coached. I really appreciate the way you said she hired a sports psychologist when she was coming right out of high school, because this is a way bigger deal than just playing basketball. And it is for everybody if they really look at that, making it a career, making it a job, if you will, where they're not making enough money, so they have to go overseas to supplement that. I think it feels like we're turning a corner a little bit. They charter flights now, things that
I know that was, I was so happy with that decision. I was so happy with that decision.
So it is because, can we say it's because they just have more eyes on it this year? I mean, there's just such.
Well, my bet is because, and it was the year that we end up selling, the new ESPN deal had come out, which was much more lucrative, because that's the other way you get money besides marketing and seats is, you know, television. And so that already in 2014, like that deal had gotten much better. So now that, you know, so I'm pretty sure that deal kept getting bigger and bigger. And the way it gets divided up is there's some that goes to the main, you know, to just the WNBA, but then each team gets their share of that.
Okay.
So that's escalating. So that, I think, is what's getting to a point where they felt comfortable that they could have teams pay for chartered flights, or I don't know. I haven't heard if the league's paying for them, but I think everyone has to do them.
Okay.
But it's because, it's because more of those big dollars are coming in.
And I think having been a basketball fan forever, just not, I don't know why I don't like NBA as much as I like college. And I didn't think I would like WNBA as much. I watched some, but I wasn't an avid fan. I am glued to season. I watch all the teams. I watch everybody. I'm loving the Aces. Kelsey Plum, I wish I would have known more about her. I mean, she's just, and Kate Martin. What a cool story to see her coming up. But
and on the controversy, both Kathy and I think, don't know, Chelsea Gray from the Aces is hurt. And so there's a lot of speculation that if she can't play, they'll sub in Caitlin Clark. But she'll likely ride the bench for most of it. Maybe not, because, when we're blowing out a team, they try to get everyone to have that experience.
Right. I feel like whether she goes or whether she doesn't, that, to me personally, I don't really care.
She'll have another chance.
Of course. I'm going to watch anyway. I always watch Olympic basketball. I love Olympic basketball. I think they're, like you said earlier, there's so much talent, and it's fun to appreciate the game in that way. And so much fun. The thing I'm really loving is this rookie class right now.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, that's why, I mean, that's why I'm sort of like, the fact, because in her first 2 years, Clark was not who she is today. And she says that too. And what I really like about Clark is she gives all the credit in the world to the shoulders of the giants she's standing on them.
For sure.
She names them by name. She gives them credit. And she takes time with the fans. We actually just enforced it. Like at our games, every single game, 2 players had to come out after the game and sign autographs. And they just sat at a table, and anyone could go and interact with them.
That's great.
That's what we did. We made them go to picnics. We made them, with the fans. I mean, we took buses to Phoenix with of our fans.
Nice.
Driving. And so, but now, there were 5 or 6 freshmen that basically carried their teams into, the final 8 at least, and some to the final 4. It was, I mean, which tells you that the talent's just going to keep ramping up.
Well, Juju, I can't wait to see what happens with her. And is she going to last all 4 years in college?
Well, currently
she's a freshman.
I know, and a true freshman. There's you have to be 22. 20? Like they don't allow one and done. Like if you redshirted, like Candace missed a year because she was injured, so she could have stayed another year, but she came out.
Okay.
And same with Caitlin, because of COVID, everyone got an extra year, but she came out.
Yeah.
But it's like, I'm not sure they may let a player out after their junior year now, but I'm not sure. But nothing before then.
Yeah. So I can't wait to watch her.
Yeah. Even the NBA has pulled back from that.
Yeah. Right. Well, we have a Devil's Lake boy who tried it.
I know.
Right.
I know.
Went back. He was an NDSU. He was one of my boys that I used to watch. Yeah. I'm excited for him. And he's going back to Alabama.
Yeah, that was the big talk around my family. I had, not
You're
my
talking
family,
about Grant Nelson, if anybody's listening, but knows that. So Paige Beckers, another really great person to watch for next year. And she's Minnesota, right? It's so fun to be connected to some of these people, and it's fun to watch. Like you mentioned Gino earlier, what a great coach that has prepared. How many WNBA players are from Connecticut?
Oh God,
All of them? No.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and count, but
A lot.
you know, I mean, yeah, and you know, that was what Diana Taurasi and Sue Bird have their own ESPN program, which I think is great. Like ESPN devoted 2 channels to them.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what, you know, the term GOAT, greatest of all time.
Of course. Mm-hmm.
Because Diana was saying, like, you know, Clark has to win this. You can't be a GOAT if you don't win a championship.
Mm-hmm.
And that, which is interesting because, you know, Gino that's what I actually like, because they were so dominant for so long. And then suddenly I think they first got knocked off by Notre Dame. And then, you know, and then suddenly it was like all different teams, and they're always super competitive, but it's no longer a foregone conclusion that they're going to win.
Right. And it's fun to see that. Even South Carolina was upset last year. That was crazy. You know, I'm watching LSU. I played at the same time that Kim Mulkey played. So I played college ball at the same time she did, but I was up here in Minnesota. She was in Louisiana. And so I knew who she was. I knew who Lisa Bluter was. Well, actually, that's not true. We played at the same time. I didn't know who she was. She's a couple of years older than I am. But I watched what happened, you know, in the basketball we were playing back when we were playing, and how it's evolved and what's happened. And it's just been so much fun to see how colorful and crazy some of the people are and the characters are, and that's why there's so much to talk about and there's so much to observe. And I'll kind of end on this: the fact that dads are bringing their daughters and sons to these games and saying, I have bonded with my kids in a way that I hadn't before. There's something happening. There's some kind of revolution happening, I feel. And I would not want to believe, as a consultant that I am, I want to believe that there's a way that we can infuse some of this energy and connection and team into our corporations and our corporate settings by just watching what's working, I was going to say not working. It's not even not working. It's just in a different way when you see like a Kennedy Carter and a Caitlin Clark thing happen, and you hear people are talking about this.
Yeah. Well, but that's evolved too. And maybe I saw it because I was in big law, right?
Yeah.
Like when I started, it was pretty much, they had come to the conclusion they had to have one woman in the room. One, but only one. And that created the queen bee syndrome, where women got pitted against each other. But just like in the basketball, that has evolved. And so like a big case I had for 4 years, like all 4 of us were on it, you know, at all 4 levels were women. And we're like, the 3 of us are best friends to this day.
Wow.
And so I've actually seen that moving. I mean, and you know, I think we have to learn to vote with our purse, right? When you see that, you know, all the law firms want to come in and meet the new, you know, GC, and one law firm came in with 6 white guys, and it was me and my head of corporate, who was an Asian man. I'm like, what? And so when they left, I said to my, you know, corporate guy, I said, can we never use them? He goes, fine with me. They're expensive. So we just never used them because I controlled the money.
Right. Love it. I love it. So things are shifting. I love that you kind of helped me see that maybe corporations have shifted, and the WNBA needs to shift now toward working together instead of combating somebody gets more attention or whatever. You know, we can see if we can get rid of the queen bee syndrome and work together and have conversations about things that bring us, you know.
Well, and I think, and Adidas did a good job of highlighting when they hired Candace, but you know, I think we should also continue to highlight those types of successes.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, Teresa Weatherspoon now has a big coaching job, and you know, now her, you know, shot in one of the first games from half court is like been seen a gazillion times over the last few weeks. Yeah.
It's moving. We're making an impact, and I love it. I'm so grateful that you took the time to chat with me. If there were some, I mean, are you promoting anything? Like, are you writing a book or anything? You probably should write a book sometime.
I have I often write short stories, but I have not. I get told that a lot, but I haven't sort of crossed that. But I come up with lots of chapters when I'm in North Dakota, and then I try to write on the plane
Nice.
as my goal. And I mean, can I tell you my purpose statement so that you know
Oh,
what
I
it is?
forgot about that. Okay, so we
Guess what?
talked about this earlier, before we started recording, and we were talking about this very thing, which is a lot of what I do with my corporate people is purpose. What is really important to you? And you so graciously said you wanted to share that, and I forgot. So thank you for reminding me, Carla. Please share your purpose statement with us.
Okay, and I worked with a coach who, you know, it was fantastic, and it's like it's a certain part, and I done it with my with the Library Foundation, and it changed. We literally increased by fourfold the donations we got, and so you have a dream that's sort of not measurable, but it's your dream, and you have beliefs, what your core beliefs are, and then you have your character, and you go around and interview, you know, your friends or colleagues to see what they say, and you make a list of that, and then you have your GSC, which is something very concrete that you're going to accomplish, and then your focus.
Okay.
And so what's funny is he said he'd never seen like my character, my first character, North Dakotan.
Really?
And I put this together a long, long time ago. Right. And it's interesting to see, you know, and it's like, you know, I have leader, generous, discerning, passionate, tenacious, true grit, authentic, which I'm like, I'll take that. But on my beliefs, there's all sorts of stuff, but I won't go through it. But I added one about 5 years ago, because you'll see why I added it when I tell you the purpose, which is helping a man may be the best way to help a woman. You know, because there's all this talk about like working for a woman, and you know, and by then I supervise a lot of men. I'm like, I want them to turn around and sort of be inspired to help. But my dream is making the world better for women, and thereby making the world a better place.
Oh, I love that.
And this guy is sort of like he has some music side. And so he actually came up with my spirit, because I used to, when I knew people were sort of down in the dumps or something at my law firm, I literally found like a child's version of This Little Light of Mine. And I would turn it on, and I would go start singing at the top of my lungs in their office just to make them laugh, right? So it became this running joke. So my spirit is this little light of mine.
And your team is the Sparks.
Yeah, this was long before I bought the Sparks.
That's so cool though. But just think about how all of those ties, the North Dakotan, the grits, the light, the Miss North Dakota, the pageant. I mean, all the things that you've done and all of the ways that you've been being you. I'm sure it wasn't always easy. And yet you've always seemed to land on your feet and make the world a better place around you, and even in law, which can't be easy.
Yeah, I always liked it. I found out 6 months ago that, you know, my initials are CC. I did not know that people in my sorority actually referred to me as Chaos Carla.
Chaos. Okay. So does that mean that you have a lot going on at one time, or what do they mean by that?
Oh, they have, you know, like the fact that I felt free to go play an intramural softball game in shorts and slide into second when I had a pageant the next day.
Oh goodness. Yeah, that could be.
You know,
but you still were there, and you still were real. And I think that's maybe the message we can leave everybody with is just follow your dream and have a purpose statement, and just do it. It sounds like you just did stuff. You didn't know how to do it. You didn't know how to
oh,
own
I
a
never knew how to do
team.
anything.
But you just followed your heart, followed your dream. And I think I love that you're raising 2 kids to do the same thing and spend their time in North Dakota so that they can get some of those values that were important to you. And sounds like they're wonderful kids.
I like them.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Carla. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
your
It
being
was
with
good.
me. And
I appreciate you having me. Thank you for a new fan of the WNBA.
absolutely, my pleasure. Of course, my pleasure. Got a game tonight. I gotta go home and see. Thank you. And everybody, as always, just go get real. We'll talk to you again. Okay. I'm hitting stop recording. Sometimes I hit